just saw Strife Crow and Bloodyface, who will be facing off later today in the Americas region in their feature match. But right now, we're in our feature match of the day. It's Jarla taking on Orange. And right now, Jarla's off to a 1-0 lead. And we got a little bit of a swap-ups that are coming in.
We have, and this is kind of the one point where this series diverges from the one that we saw previously, where in this series, Jarla does actually have a dedicated anti-rogue sideboard for his secondary or tertiary deck? Tertiary deck, where he has Rabble Bouncers, Halftime Scavengers, and Frostbolts piled in there as well. Orange, of course, as discussed, will be switching to that very standard list that we've been talking about, but there you see it. Those two Halftime Scavengers allowed you to build a base against aggro, sometimes pick up a little bit of armor off the tray, but that's not the big deal. The big deal is just a minion sticking to the board that you can then use as a base for your Conjurer's Callings and your Bananas and everything else that comes down after that. Frostbolt is an interesting addition because it's extremely good against all of the 3 health minions that are being played, the Blink Foxes and the Burglars. But the one option that comes in on the rogue side is, of course, that Fairy Dragon that we've talked about extensively, which the Frostbolt is not an answer to, so can end up being a dead card.
Indeed, it can. I like this side deck plan. I think that Archmage Encinitas is just not a very effective tool against the quicker decks that are out there. And same for Ludus Pocket Galaxy. And so I think when you have these dedicated tools in your deck that are meant to fight the slower decks you expect on average, what ends up happening is you have a wonderful swap-up game plan which allows you to counter the aggression your opponent's trying to bring. However, Orange, with the Walk Plank Fairy Dragon Betrayal, I feel like the Halftime Scavengers are good in the matchup, but they are a little bit clunky.
A little bit, but they are significantly less clunky than a lot of other cards that you could be putting in your deck. You know, just the stealth in and of itself. Like I talked about when we were discussing whether or not Rogue is an aggro deck, they spend a lot of their early turns just denying the opponent any development and just gaining tempo by removing things that the opponents play. Just playing minions against Rogue sometimes activates their hand, right? We talk about how playing a minion on turn 3 activates their Backstab Miscreant. It activates their SI7 agent. It activates their Vendetta. It gives them things to do, which then gives them combo activators, which then makes their other cards more powerful. So a stealth minion then takes all of that stuff away from the rogue.
I am going to feel for Orange in this game because he has Fairy Dragon and Jarla has drawn the Doomsayer. Full mulligan for Orange, looking specifically, I think, for Fairy Dragon curves. And for Jarla, my goodness. You see why the Doomsayer's in here. This is mega powerful.
Not only does he have Doomsayer, he has Apprentice Evocation Cyclone to come behind that very soon as well.
That draw needed to be Vendetta.
Yep.
It really did.
Yep.
Orange, oh my goodness. This
and there is almost no reason to sap this Doomsayer because it will just come back down and put yourself in the same position next turn. The one argument would be to make your opponent do that. And so disrupt their turn 3, and then give yourself one more draw to find that Vendetta to be able to take a tempo turn against it. But it is not an appealing prospect.
You do open up Waggle Pick for that draw as well.
That's true. That is true.
And the real big story I'm looking at is that you give up a sap is the thing.
Yep.
But if you let this Fairy Dragon go...
you do now have 2 Walk the Planks in your deck.
That's true. And that, it also opens up that one as well. You could also Walk the Plank for the Doomsayer. But at that point, you're spending sap and Walk the Plank to get a 3-2 connecting to your opponent's face, which I guess is technically worth it.
Multiple times.
Yeah. So I'm actually curious about this, and Orange shaking his head. My instinct tells me he will not land on the sap.
Same.
But if he lands on this sap, I think I'm impressed. However, I'm also impressed by the diligence. I just don't know which one of these is better. I really do not. And cashing on the Blink Fox makes some sense here as well.
Okay.
You're going to need something big to happen this game, so start looking now. The generic pressure plan has been absolutely squelched due to that tech choice.
Jarla here did not find a spell to go along with that Sorcerer's Cyclone combo, so has left himself in a bit of a sticky spot. If he'd have found himself a magic trick or a mirror image, I think we might have just been seeing Jarla just take the board here as early as turn 3 against Mage.
What to do?
It's still not the most ridiculous prospect in the world, honestly.
I really feel like I want to wait.
Time runs out on me.
Well, if you look at it from Jarla's perspective, Orange throwing a 3-3 into the board there almost certainly signals that he has more development to do from this point. So if you don't play the board here, you have to be happy with the position that your opponent's going to have a 3-3 or a 4-3 most likely on the board for the rest of the game to deal with your position.
Yeah, I'm curious if the Rabble Bouncer draw actually influences some of that as well.
Maybe.
Where if you don't fight aggressively for that board development, what that means is perhaps you get a swing turn with the generic cards you're playing, rather than just trying to create tension so that you can answer what's happening on the other side.
Orange just ending up on a very slow game plan right now, as you rightly pointed out, mostly due to the fact that Doomsayer did come down to disrupt his aggression. This is night and day the way this game has panned out, between that Fairy Dragon just sticking around and connecting face, being followed up by Blink Fox, being followed up by Blink Fox again, the damage just piling up.
I wonder.
Jarla would almost be facing down lethal by this point if that Doomsayer did not come down.
And for Jarla here, he's absolutely, I think, going to be waiting again for the Evocation Giant Coin Conjurer's Calling turn. However, there's going to be implications around that as well. Just the fact that he had the major impact of Doomsayer, I think, gives him a lot of liberty to wait and figure out how to flex this turn.
Yep.
Or rather, this game. Because this is a vast multi-turn setup.
So if he plays nothing here, Giant goes down to 4 next turn when he will have 5 mana. He can then Elemental Evocation it down to 3, leaving himself with 2 mana, and then coin out the Conjurer's Calling to get the job done.
See, the Giant now is really curious to me. Oh, you know what? I bet it's specifically because the Shark is here, where one of his thoughts is if Orange has to spend his turn walk the planking, he's not getting an activation out of the Shark.
Good point.
But what do you follow up with then? Maybe it's the other way around too, where because Orange has the Shark down, you don't anticipate him using Walk the Plank, and thus you get the payoff of the Conjurer's Calling.
Right.
This is weird. That actually might be... That might be right from a game theory standpoint, which this is super rare in Hearthstone.
Yeah, I'm personally not sure that I like it from Jarla.
So I'm going to go a little bit deep down the rabbit hole here because I think we very rarely talk about game theory, and rightfully so. It's incredibly complex, and we don't really have time. But
I'm looking forward to this one.
If you take a balanced stance, it's a difficult thing to do. And so how does Orange best exploit the fact that he's played a turn 4 Spear to Shark? It's either with big battle cries, or it's either by using one of his utility cards from a side deck that punishes the Mountain Giant play. If that's the case, you have to find a balanced range by which you will play Mountain Giant to offset either plan that Orange is trying to exploit in that instance. If he has both, he has an advantage over you. In that spot, Jarla will sometimes play the Giant, and sometimes he will not, even though his hand will be identical in this situation sometimes. It's a weird thing to do, but balance is important to avoid an overall exploitation that matter. That's probably not something that he's actively thinking about, because oftentimes it comes up coincidentally. But from a pure game theory standpoint, that is something that players are capable of thinking of and often will ignore because it's just too deep and complex. There's not really much else for me to talk about in these turns is what's going on, so I decided to go that route with it. The point is, game theory is very tough to apply in Hearthstone because there's too many hidden variables.
I'm going to preemptively clarify that I want no further explanation, but I want it on the record that I have no idea what you just said.
That's why I don't want to talk about it. It's complicated. You have to read a lot of boring books that take too much time.
Oh, I do a lot of that.
Boring things interest me.
Same.
Would you like to borrow the books I have on the topic?
Sure. This Giant is
toast.
Super dead, though. But yeah, I'm going to go back to my simple statement of I'm just not sure I like that Giant play last turn from Jarla. It's equally poor to do nothing in that situation. Let your opponent generate a huge board off their Spirit of the Shark, and then double Giant into that with the Evocation Conjurer's Calling turn. But you have flexibility from that point where you don't necessarily always end up doing that. Like sometimes you get a Rabble Bouncer turn out of it. Sometimes you draw something that gives you a Cyclone turn out of it. Like you leave yourself with more options and the payoff of a lot of the time a larger board coming off the backside, where I think the single Giant drop there Although I've kind of advocated for like just do it and don't play around the removal cards that the rogue can have available, there wasn't like a huge payoff for it in my mind, even if it did stick.
Yeah, it's that is perhaps one of the most complicated spots I've actually seen from from a Mage and Grandmasters. I feel like I could literally write a novel about that turn.
You almost did.
Yeah, and that was just like 90 seconds. Like, imagine if I spoke at the speed I did yesterday during the rant.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out also that Jarla faced down the worst possible pan out for the play that he made, right? Which was Sap, the single copy of Sap that Orange plays in his deck.
Was Sap the worst?
Yes.
I think Plank might have been worse because it prevented him from playing the second. The Sap allowed the second giant to be.
But the plank means that nothing bad. The plank means that nothing bad happens with the Spirit of the Shark that turn, which is the point that you also made. Whereas Sap allowed Sap Miscreant or Sap Blinkfox or Sap SI or whatever else.
Well, look what the Rabble Bouncer Conjurers just did.
Yeah.
Sottle and I specifically reviewed the 7 drops today, talking about Rabble Bouncer, and we noticed that there is a pretty big trough between the hits and misses.
Yeah, it's huge variant.
Yeah, it's like median, I think, becomes a more important than average result that you get from it. And in this instance, Jarla, because he's gotten Storm and Champion, it turns all the results to pretty good. But we determined that Priest land is really where you want to live with this, because the minions you get from Priest are just big. The Doomsayer providing the early defense means he's not under pressure, so just the big minions end up being very effective.
Yeah, and this game has very quickly devolved in Hearthstone as presented by a Rocky movie, where it's just huge haymakers being thrown back and forth the entire time as if that's what boxing is.
Yeah, I mean, this game is weird.
Yeah.
Choose soon.
There's a lot of random stuff that happens in Hearthstone. A lot of times you kind of look at it and you're like, oh, that's cool, that makes sense. I have no idea how to begin parsing what the best play in these situations are.
And it's where the argument comes in, right? Like, bad beats due to random elements and so on can feel bad, and you can get salty about it, and you can want to complain that the games are too random, but the more random outcomes you have to consider, the more difficult the game then becomes, and therefore the ability to gain a skill edge increases. The problem comes to the point where things become too random that it becomes beyond the ability of a human being to pass things.
Or if the random is too impactful.
Yes, too swingy in
diminishes
one direction or the other.
the result. This doesn't feel like one of those games, though. This feels like a very interesting battle in this one.
It feels like the decisions that the players have made has led us to a position where, you know, random outcomes can have an influence, but the decision points themselves, you know, Orange's play into the Doomsayer, Jarla's choice to just drop a giant, those are the key factors that have led us to where we are right now.
And so for Jarla, I'm a little unclear of what his goals are this turn. I think from the point that he's in, it's preparing for the next power turns you're going to have. And, you know, power creation is a very obvious one. And so it's a pretty generic game plan of, I think you just keep killing stuff. Tell you what, Vanish is a pretty big kicker in this game.
Yeah, Vanish becomes even more effective than you'd think when you're dealing with a board that's been generated by a Sea Giant. Because if you're dealing with a board that's been generated by a Mountain Giant, the Mage can make those minions that you vanish back cheap again. Right? Like, you've just vanished them, so it's likely they have a large hand size because of that, so therefore their Mountain Giant becomes cheap again. Their Grave Horror, they cast a lot of spells over the course of the game, so there's a good chance their Grave Horror becomes cheap again. Sea Giant minions, when they get vanished back to the hand, those things just sit in hand and kind of suck.
And in this case, Rabble Bouncer minions. Now, there is a bit of a cute interaction with the Night Scale Matriarch and the Wormrest Agent, the 4/8 and 3/10 respectively. The 3/10 is initially a 3/11. It says if you're holding a dragon, it gets +1 attack and taunt.
Right.
So that is a weird vanish circumstance. And so for Orange, you want to eliminate the Giants. Those are the most threatening ones. And kind of on Orange's point that we heard in the media piece, Jarla tends to be on the control side. And so I think Orange got that signal pretty clearly last turn, where instead of pushing 7 damage, Jarla chose to kill off 1 attack minions.
Yeah.
I think this is playing towards Orange's game plan right now, where he's using the little tools to buy him time so that he can find the turn to vanish and try and take an advantage from that spot.
Yeah, and I was just about to beg the question that, you know, with a huge chunk of damage on board in minions, +2 Frost Novas plus a Fireball in hand, at what point is Jarla supposed to just say, okay, forget trading, I'm just going to be aggressive?
See, that's a great
And
question.
I think last turn was a justifiable answer to that question.
And I'm finally starting to put pieces together in this game because so much has been happening. But that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, it also makes a lot of sense to me that Jarla would take it slow and say, with this many resources, I think I can win by eliminating the opposing side. That's what he's tended to do in his Hearthstone play.
Your opponent also has a hand full of a lot of resources, and one of those resources is a stepped Spirit of the Shark that you know is there. So playing a resource battle with them is a very dangerous game.
That safeguard might change his game plan.
But again, like, interesting,
What though?
interesting mentality thing, because Can was an option there, which is a much more aggressive option than Safeguard, right? Because it's so much more difficult for your opponent to deal with.
I think that's somewhat subjective too. I view them both as aggressive options, with the Safeguard having the upside of that it's also defense. Where when you have,
I guess
20 health worth of taunt in the way, you can just start attacking.
Right. You use the Safeguard as like your Tar Creeper and Aggro Druid, where it keeps your other minions alive and just hit face.
And to me, that's been one of the most effective uses of taunts. It's to protect the other minions so that your minions can keep attacking face.
Makes sense.
Taunts equals damage.
And I could get behind that theory, but Jarla has then just continued to trade after that point.
I'm interested. I'm very interested now. In fact, when I'm done with Grandmasters, I'm probably going to go home and watch this match a lot.
Looks like Orange is going to say enough is enough.
He has a dragon in his hand for the Cathedral Gargoyle. A fairy dragon.
Oh, you're so right. Heck got faceless in response to this. What is with all the dragon synergy?
Yeah, what the
going on in
heck?
this game? Like, what is happening right now?
I feel like this is like foreshadowing.
Yeah. Both of them have just found a way to end up with a activated dragon synergy card in their hand, and then immediately after that, Khadgar pulls out 2 fire treatment goblins. Like, what?
I wonder.
But yeah, Orange, with that vanish last turn, has had to say to himself, well, okay, I'm going to have to deal with a lot of taunt minions from this point onwards. He did manage to burn one of them with the Safeguard going back, but of course that generates the 0/5 on board. But he now knows that there is a second Safeguard and another activated taunt via the dragon that he also vanished back to the
Right,
hand.
and look at Orange setting up the vanish in this spot. That's something that's very difficult for Jarla to anticipate, obviously. But if Jarla had just gone, you know what, my minions are bigger and I'm dealing more damage than Orange's, and I have 2 Frost Novas anyway, he would have dealt 14 damage to Orange when we're in this spot. So Orange would be down to 15 staring at rebuilding this board for Jarla.
Yeah.
It would be about the same thing because, you know, maybe Jarla has a few less points of life, but honestly, we have gone so far away from the damage race perspective from Orange's side that I have to give the edge to Jarla in this situation. I just think he's got a massive lead. Now, 2 Vendettas can change a lot of things when you have a 7 mana thing in your hand that says +2 spell damage. What is happening?
I wonder.
This is dumb, dude. I want to play a different game. I play a nice friendly game of tic-tac-toe. That game's easy.
Can I forward?
Sure. Take 12, idiot.
That's a good-looking turn.
Choose silly.
Why is it active? Has this ever happened before?
Has anyone in the history of Hearthstone ever played an activated Cathedral Gargoyle before? Probably.
While playing Rogue versus Mage
Probably.
in Hearthstone Grandmasters, when their names are Orange and Jarla.
Okay.
If you get specific enough, the answer is always no. But
yeah, you got me there. Would you like to temper the idea that you thought Jarla was in a very dominant position last turn? Because I found that slightly weird when you said it.
well, he drew the second Vendetta. I mean, come on.
He had a relatively effective turn with just the one Vendetta.
Oh,
that he had.
please. He would have had to use 3 more minions.
Yeah.
That Vendetta was 3 2/2s
Well,
onto the board attacking.
No. The key point was that he didn't actually have to clear the board that turn because he was playing a Divine Shield Taunt 2/2.
That's true.
He could have just left it there.
But I
What
think
to
that
do?
He
if...
just had to
What
generate
to
a huge
do?
board himself.
Yeah, I think leaving it there opens up a lot of counterplay for
It
Jarla.
does, yeah.
where
Jarla
instead he is-
would be in a much, much better position if he still had a minion base to work with.
Which I still think he's in a good position. I actually do still think he's favored from here.
Okay.
I'm going to sound crazy sometimes
Out on me.
because the draws are very volatile right now. But yeah, I think he's advantaged.
Okay.
Say the magic word.
Don't say it.
You know what I'm thinking.
Spirit of the Shark, Shadow Step the Witch Tree.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's get cooking.
I just said not to say it. We said it.
So many.
I think this takes the cake for the weirdest game of Hearthstone in Grandmasters.
7 damage Cinderstorm on top of all of that as well.
A lot of those went face as well, which I actually think is pretty good for Orange in that spot. Like, there's a good chance he gets a Vendetta off of this.
Yeah. I'm also curious as to whether he is supposed to Shark in this position, or whether that Shark is better held for Life Drinker draws at this point.
Daring escape.
Sap
Oh.
and Banish again!
Choose silly.
That's
And the
absurd.
contract. The contract is a decent card too.
Right, I forget that card exists.
I don't know what to do. Turncoat contract.
It's the Betrayal Effect one, right?
Well, it's just that we said turncoat earlier.
Oh, okay.
Was it that one?
Yeah.
Yep. Kind of also to your point earlier when you mentioned Assassinate and 1 mana cheaper with conditional on it, 1 mana more expensive, you get a powerful effect.
Yep.
Still not playable. It's good off random effects though.
What to do? What to
Random effects
do?
take time to show up anyway. And so if the game is, progressed to what I would call the weirdest game that I've seen in competitive in a very long time.
Do you remember the Hearthstone World Championship Finals, Admiral?
Touche.
Yeah.
Touche. It is just weird to me that a player could have played a card that said, turn the finals of a world championship into a tavern brawl for 1 game.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think Jarla is
To
favored
do.
anymore.
What to do?
I mean, that turncoat contract,
As
I
long as
think,
it keeps on.
Orange took it looking for that high roll in this position and hit it. Like, that changes so much in terms of Jarla's ability to make any kind of board that Orange can't answer now. Because the difference between Betrayal and Turncoat contract against Mage is huge.
Yeah. It's mega good. Wow, should it just be turncoat No, because sometimes you get coins or it puts in your hand or you make a patient assassin or whatever.
What are you talking about?
I was like, well, could you put an unidentified contract in the secondary
So
deck?
many options.
And the answer is no, you don't always get turncoat contracts.
Right, yeah. Okay, good.
Unless you do.
I am now pleased that I made you repeat that.
I am too, because I caught myself in a really stupid idea.
Yeah.
So many options.
You know, I would guess that orange still doesn't feel super comfortable here, though.
Nope.
Like, there's just a lot of weird things that are happening, and you don't have much to do this turn.
First things first. First item on the agenda is work out what this secret is. Because that changes a lot of what your game plan is moving forward. So you have 4 damage available from SI7 Agent this turn, and 6 more from Leroy, plus additional dagger swings. That's very quickly adding up to lethal over the next couple of turns. But if that secret is Vaporize, that goes out the window very quickly.
Yeah. You also have to account for the halftime scavenger and the overkill.
Yep.
It's going to restore 3 armor, or it's going to gain 3 armor, rather, every time it overkills a minion. And so that for Jarla is the climb back into this situation where you have 2 halftime scavengers, those chip away at the board while you're Frost Noving to buy time, and then you're looking for your next power turn.
Right.
So kind of look back to Jarla not pushing face. Did it make sense? I don't know.
I am unsure. Yeah. We're so far separated from that world that it's hard to know.
And that tells you exactly where Jarla's at. He wants to find minions that do things. That one hurts.
Yikes.
Time runs out on me.
And I wonder what that tells Orange with the Book of Specters not only taken, but cast in the immediacy. You've been seeing a lot of these cards held onto for a long time.
As long as it keeps out arrows.
And that gargoyle is a major nuisance on Jarla's overall progress.
Yep. This is kind of what I've been talking about several times now, about how, you know, Mage rarely pings. It's rarely a good thing for them to do, right? Like, ping the Divine Shield and then get the overkill active off the halftime scavenger was just not really a prospect for Jarla, because you just have to spend so much mana every turn on doing powerful things.
That's not a good draw. I'm looking at Banana Buffoon, use the banana, ping the thing, attack the shark with the 4 power 1, Frost Nova again, go ahead.
What to do? What to do?
Can't say I disagree with any of the words you just said.
Kind of look at the fireball.
Yeah, I was about to say, the only thing I'd add to that is if he gets the Apprentice down as well, can he fit in Fireball alongside that? 2, 5, 8, 10? Yeah, he can, right? Does that change anything?
Takes away the ping.
Takes away the ping, right.
Time runs out on me.
Wow, that did not feel like that long. This turncoat contract is going to be big. That positioning versus turncoat contract. You want that one on the outside.
Yep.
There's so much going on. Someone finally made a mistake. An identifiable mistake. It's so rare.
I mean, I think it's actually just fair to call as well, because there is just a natural copy of Betrayal in the deck that you have to think about as well.
I mean, this is just not... honestly, Betrayal I don't even think is like necessarily that bad a thing. Like, it's like, yeah, it sucks.
It doesn't
but,
mean you're not supposed to play around it.
Correct, and it's just like, we ran into like one of the weirdest games ever. We're in a very deep circumstance. There's a lot of random created cards. It's super nitpicky to call this a big mistake. And Orange first needs to identify also what that secret is. He hasn't checked for Spellbender just yet, so he's going to check for Spellbender as well. And now he gets the word, and perhaps maybe it wasn't a mistake because of the bluff of Spellbender. Ah, dang it!
I don't know about that one, Chief.
I think it's got some merit.
Choose soon.
Orange, I don't think, is hyped to just rip his spells when he doesn't know what the secret is.
So many options.
But very quickly, I think the real story is that Jarla has started to become gassed out.
Yeah.
And leader in the middle.
Yep. And I kind of said it at the time, right? Jarla has kind of played a value game, and he's kind of getting outvalued. Like, you know, even if this board wasn't here, Orange actually has resources to keep going for some time with the Hench Clan in hand, Turncoat contract to kill whatever minions Jarla chooses to develop. I felt at the time with a Shadow Step Shark in hand that you knew about. It was a dangerous game to just try and go long resource for resource with the Rogue here. And that's why I favored the aggression at the time.
At least you have a reason for it. I just wanted to hit him.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah. If you attack them, they have less life. That's about as deep as it goes for me.
Awaken, my children.
I'm trying to think of what draws really can change the scope of this for Jarla now, and I'm thinking it might be exactly down to card draw at this point. Does he have card draw left? And then what do you draw into?
There is that copy of Betrayal. I think Orange finally gets to fully resolve this secret this turn. No matter what it is, he will figure it out.
It was reduced to exactly that, I believe.
Splitting image.
Ah, yeah.
I think hadn't been checked for. Not 100% sure.
Oh my gosh. Swipe.
Did you have? Did it have to be whispered?
Dramatic effect.
Gotcha. I love how this Turncoat contract just seemed like the nuts draw at the time that he picked it, and it just hasn't been the best play in the opinion of Orange on any turn since then.
It's such a powerful tool and he hasn't needed it.
Yep.
Powerful tool equals beat big stuff. Your deck doesn't have to do everything, it just has to do enough. And that's enough.
12 comes down on the Edwin, and yeah, 4, 7, 10, 13 in play. Even just with the dagger, Orange going to go down with the Leroy in what was A, an absolute marathon of a game, and B, an absolute nonsense of a game, with you know, both players managing to have dragon-activated effects with cards that were purely not starting in their deck to begin with. Absolute nonsense.
That was wacky.
Yeah, and
Plain and simple.
you do have to rewind a long way. A lot of stuff has happened since then, but there were a lot of key decisions early on just with the native cards that started in their deck before things started going down the line.
Yeah.
There was the Doomsayer that Orange chose to let resolve. There was the Mountain Giant play from Jarla, which was debated quite heavily at the time as well. And then on top of that, there was the very, very clear moment where he chose to keep being controlling with his strategy, just playing taunts and continuing to trade into minions and take stuff off the board, as opposed to just looking at a hand that had lots of freeze effects and a fireball that he died with in his hand, by the way, and not seeing that as a signal to try and push some aggression.
Yeah, I think that his draws were quite poor afterwards, I will say, but I don't think that you can necessarily expect some explosive potential there. So that's really the one spot that I look at as well, is that Jarla never took a spot to find an aggressive turn. And I think he's looking for a bit more of a decisive spot in order to be able to do that. I don't know if you get in that situation, you're like, ah, yes, I'm in this situation all the time with a randomly generated 4-8 and a 3-9. Now's the time to get aggressive behind these taunts.
Yeah.
There's the choice of the Cairn as well, where I think that the taunt potential was unlocking something for him, but I think that he didn't use the taunt potential to its fullest capacity, which was the ability to get aggressive. So that's the spot I look at. For me, the Mountain Giant, I can go either way on it. And in fact, you know, I explained how I would go either way on it. It just depends. like literally randomly would have chosen it when if I at the time I could have recognized that. Again, I don't think he's consciously recognizing that. And so everything I look at the end of the game boils down to, by the way, this was a rogue versus mage game. That plain and simple, how did we get to that spot is what I wonder with.
Yeah.
That's a tough game to call in terms of anything other than Jarla's intent on killing board rather than getting it back.
It's like one of those screenshots you see on Twitter where it's just like 2 different Death Knights or hero cards from 2 different classes going up against each other with a random selection of like cards from 3 or 4 different classes in their hand, and it's just captioned, "This started as a rogue mirror." Like, that happens. Rogue can do that now.
Yeah, it definitely can get pretty crazy at times. That's the craziest one I've seen in a while. The player stepped away for a moment, so that's why we're jammering on about this stuff. It's just funny to me that you mentioned the Fire Tree Witch Doctor as well. And then the next draw was Shadow Step.
Yeah.
Spirit of the Shark.
That was interesting to me as well. The fact that he chose to use his Spirit of the Shark that had been Shadow Stepped on his Fire Tree Witch Doctor. It's worth noting that Orange's version here that he's playing, his secondary deck actually removes one of the copies of Life Drinker from his deck, which reduces his potential to get big burst damage off his Life Drinker with the Spirit of the Shark. I think if there were 2 copies of Life Drinker still remaining in his deck from that position, arguably holding the Shadow Step and holding the Spirit of the Shark actually both gain a lot more weight to be able to just burst from hand at a mage that I believe had like 16 or 18 health at that point.
Oh, we're back to a normal game.
Well, for now, there are 2 Blink Foxes in Orange's hand and a Mana Cyclone in Jarla's.
That is normal. I expect that to stay normal, as I expect the game plan for Orange to be straightforward here. Get aggressive.
Normal cards that very quickly lead to abnormal cards.
Get aggressive, start pushing, have walk the plank to clear out to the giant that might have to be plopped as a response to your aggression. Yeah. This is just such a clean game plan. Like, this is actually like card games 101. Get a thing in play, start attacking, blow up your opponent's thing they use to defend.
Yes.
And the range from Rogue, I think, pulls Jarla largely off of the idea of Sorcerer's Apprentice here. Backstab, SI7 Agent. Both of those are very bad. For you when you play Sorcerer's Apprentice, I guess I should clarify that.
Job's done.
Interesting. Orange favors the Miscreant here.
He has consistently throughout this series made plays that has kind of indicated to me that he sees a lot of value in Evil Miscreant in the matchup. If he does win, I will be very interested to ask him about his thoughts on the power level of Evil Miscreant in the matchup.
To me, it's specifically contrasted versus what Bunny Hopper did, where he mulliganed away the Miscreant. Now, granted, he was going first. Going second, I've just tended to favor the curve plays. I really have. And my thought on it is that it's just yielded me so much more damage that when I land a big removal spell, it has a bigger impact. Right. I think this is cool. And for Jarla, you know, this is clearly in favor of holding the Sorcerer's Apprentice on 2 when you took into account the context of his hand. He's been rewarded with a Ray of Frost now, and you're looking at a massive spell-generated turn.
Yep, this is the kind of hand that Jarla was looking for last time he had this combination of Apprentice, Evocation, and Mana Cyclone in hand. Magic Trick is the one card that can unlock all of that. Frostbolt is just about the nuts to pick up off the Magic Trick. And now the game is going to enter potentially wacky territory very quickly. Orange shaking his head, can't quite believe how good this turn ends up being from Jarla.
Yeah.
Still 1 mana remaining to keep going if any of these spells are usable.
Runs out on me.
Nope. Shooting Star technically usable, but just not appropriate for the situation.
Looking at Blizzard to be a big impact on the rest of this, but honestly pretty weak pickups alongside of it. And so with Orange, I feel like he's obviously got to pay some attention to board here. But Jarla does not really have super clean ways to begin making headway on this position. He's just going to have to start spending all of his cards and not really getting much out of it. Just kind of answering stuff. I don't like answering generated cards. Right. It feels... what's the opposite of fortuitous?
Bad.
I once complimented you on your
You're
board
welcome.
knowledge.
Yeah. Well, unfortuitous.
Is it just un?
I think so.
Oh, that's unexciting.
Hmm.
To plop or not to plop? That is the Mountain Giants question. Why is that so funny?
It's I'm laughing at a joke I made in my own head that I definitely am not gonna say on broadcast
All right.
in response to that.
That's all you.
Yeah. I'm having a great time.
Well, I'm having a good time too. I mean, we're just all the situations that we've
Runs
talked
out
about
on me.
being potential are just happening.
What to do? What to do?
Unity. Precision.
Much more responsible. Jarla has also shown that he is very willing to wait and try to find a better spot. Orange still like in a weird development phase too, where it's just like, where do I find the right spot to just go in? That's the second time he's found John Lai. He found it in game 1 as well.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
It doesn't work with rogue hero power.
Nope.
Job's done.
Neither does the spirit. He's got the spirit of John Lai and the John. That's just like two of the worst things you can find. Now I'm thinking about it.
Orange has definitely set himself down this path, though, where you said he's kind of in a weird development phase. He's kind of put himself in that weird development phase by going for the activated miscreant early on instead of just going for straight damage options with the blink foxes and pushing damage. Which, his randomly generated cards so far have not really been paying out for him, but that's not really what it's about in the matchup. It's just about getting pressure down early, from my perspective.
I'm not sure if it worked out better or worse because
What to do?
the evil miscreant
What to
did pull
do?
2 Ray of Frost as well. Where if a blink fox pulls 2 Ray of Frost, it's gonna die.
Yes.
Time runs out
So
on
he
me.
may have just actually netted an extra minion from his
I think so.
iteration.
Yeah, in this game, the way he played it was much better against Sorcerer's Apprentice Evocation Cyclone with a bunch of spells to go with it
Yeah.
as well, because he actually not only kept a minion in play against that, he also found himself answers off the Miscreant to be able to deal with it afterwards.
Yeah.
But just because that's the case, it worked out better this game does not mean that it works out better on average to do it that way.
And you saw Orange's reaction to the Shadow Step draw. And for Jarla, the foregoing on a secret here is specifically a nod to drawing Conjurer's Calling, I believe. For Orange, though, this turn, this is about as mega weak as you get.
Mega weak.
Oh, 6 mana Life Drinker, go.
It sounds like a promotional event at like a low-rent store somewhere.
It's mega weak.
It's mega weak here at Dave's Discount Mufflers. Like that's just what I hear when you say that. Conjurers
What to
was
do?
not found. I think
What
you
to
are
do?
spot on in your analysis of that is something that Jarla was looking for, as he does not play a secret on the previous turn.
How slow can you keep taking the game? I guess you are free to develop a secret this turn because A, you have the Mana Cyclone, and then B, you're still running into the same situation with Mountain Giant. It'll go to 5 cost.
Yeah,
Conjurer's Calling.
without the Cyclone, it would go to 5, and you'd have 8 next turn. Hello!
Well, that's interesting. You know, Orange's hand has been quite full the entire game, and it actually is probably likely to stay that way.
Yep.
The fact that he can offset the symmetrical effect just by virtue of Orange playing into this value game plan, which his hand, I think, very much has forced him to do.
Right.
So many options.
That's a major benefit for Jarla.
Jarla there went with Barrier instead of the Mirror Entity, is that right? Ice Barrier is what the secret is?
Yes. And I think that's better for him overall because the mirror entity gets checked instantaneously. And that's exactly what Orange is thinking about here. Oh my goodness. Is that, like, what battle cries are in Jarla's deck? The Mana Psych Banana Buffoon?
Why are we talking about battle cries?
Because what's the, like, who cares about checking the mirror entity with the Spirit of the Bat or whatever that thing is instead of the Shark? Like, what battle cries is Jarla gonna get? Is it specifically to do this lackey play? He checked for mirror entity there, right?
Right.
What difference does it make if Jarla gets a Shark?
I'd say you're saying that Spirit of the Shark is the best thing.
It's the same thing, right? It's a 0/3.
Right.
Banana Buffoon.
As opposed to giving them the spirit that makes the hero power target adjacent minions, which would actually be pretty good for you.
Wait a minute.
It would
Hang
be pretty
on a
bad
second.
for you in that position.
No.
All right. Jeez.
That's weird.
Okay.
I'm upset. I think everything's looked pretty good. I think that's just a blunder.
What to do?
Didn't punish him, but it's not my point.
Wow, that is so much respect given to a Spirit of the Shark. Guess what, dummy? There's another one.
I like the respect. Orange hasn't been doing anything. Like, he's about to do something. Ah, you were right. We entered wacky territory again.
Yeah, we did. Saw it coming a mile away. I don't know. I was kind of into the Spirit of the Shark. From Jarla's perspective, I was kind of just thinking, like, Spirit of the Shark, he fills his hand up with value because of the Spirit of the Shark, and then I get to cast these research projects with no downside, which my hand is not doing a great amount either.
That's what I was thinking as well. I like the respect. I don't necessarily, again, a lot of the plays that Jarla makes in situations, they're just different from what everyone else does.
Right.
It's very different often from what I would do as well. And that's why I think makes him so interesting to watch is that he maintains a pretty strong win rate overall. And at times, you know, like last year, for instance, he was one of the best in the world.
My hand is too full.
The Orange nearly did his very own spit take there as the second research project came down.
And Leroy getting burned, you know, it's pretty rare that cards getting burned is actually even relevant in a lot of these situations too, but Leroy getting burned away means that if you go the full distance, you do not have access to Leroy Shadow Steps or Leroy Waggle Pick.
Right.
That's a big deal.
It's so crazy that Orange has been so slow to develop pressure, both somewhat through his own choices, but mostly through just the order of his deck in this scenario. That Jarla has done basically nothing this entire game, and therefore hasn't really played any threats that Orange has had to answer with Walk the Plank that have just been sat on the far left hand, far left side of his hand the entire game.
Like, honestly, if Orange had just shown like Fairy Dragons this game, he probably just would have killed Jarla.
Yeah.
Start going face, I guess.
I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, Orange just has to get some cards out of his hand first and foremost this turn. So he can start filling it back up again with all the things that generate cards in his hand.
From nothing.
So he's looking for damage here.
Is he? Is he looking for damage, or is he going to play out a similar game to the one that we saw last time, where he just kills everything Jarla plays until he runs out of ways to answer whatever board he has?
Recruitment contract, I believe, is you take the minion and add it to your hand after you blow it up.
Yeah.
And so in this spot, he's only got one minion slot left on board. I'm kind of up for the Jarla in that spot. Just 7 mana 4/4. Like this, you don't get the full effect from it. You're actually burning a card as a result of this play. Unless you Arcane Shot.
False. Yeah.
So that would be why he plays the Burglar first there. Wants the minion in play. I guess the Jarla also represents an unknown resource. To Jarla, it could very easily be a damaging spell.
I wonder.
Jarla leaning towards Stargazer Luna immediately, it seems like. Which I would suggest means he's looking at this being a Frost Nova turn, potentially.
Tools of creation.
Although I guess with Rabble Bouncer, he doesn't necessarily have to. He can divert off that.
Time runs out on
The
me.
reason I like the Frost Nova is a lot of reasons, actually. Number one, we have second Frost Nova in hand. Number two, I have Rabble Bouncer to follow it up. So my opponent's board will stay weak in this situation, and I will get to continue to take little cracks at him while I have a Rabble Bouncer in play. So my final hurrah after I do all this is that I get to keep attacking and chipping away life total. I'll get to add Mountain Giant to it at some point to threaten things. And then when it's all said and done, I stick a Rabble Bouncer in play, and my opponent has a bunch of two attack and 1 attack minions. But he has once again entered the I'm going to take it slow category. And so I guess what he's looking for specifically is to find Mountain Giant, Conjurer's Calling, Frost Nova. Throw the Khadgar in there as well.
Sure, why not?
But that would require him to have a full hand and an evocation? Oh, that's... The Doomsayer is pretty awkward for Orange as well. He obviously wants to get cards out of hand. Doomsayer's threatening to grab initiative back. There's a lot of objectives here.
Yeah, the initiative is the big deal right now because the board state is actually relatively even in terms of what Jarla would be destroying with this Doomsayer if Orange let it go off.
You might even call it Jarla favored.
Yeah, exactly. So Jarla playing the Doomsayer here is just about wanting to deny initiative from Orange, to not be able to develop through this board and just take a free turn himself. Worth noting that his Betrayal positioning was significantly better this turn. Hell. Whoa, okay, I didn't look at this at all. Spirit of the Shark, Kobold, Shadow Step, Kobold is 12.
That is
genius
galaxy
play.
brain.
Yeah, that is actually incredible.
Oh.
I love that so much. I did not even consider that for one moment, and it is so smart.
Well done. That is like one of the most counterintuitive and simplest of things imaginable.
Yep.
But it's hard to spot.
I believe these games have blended together. They've been 3 very long ones, but I believe Ziliax has been used this game, so this point is kind of redundant, but let's pretend it hasn't. The one way your opponent gets out of this is with Ziliax. And by letting the Doomsayer go off, you solve that problem for yourself by just not leaving minions in play. It's just so elegant a solution to the problem he was faced with.
It's just so simple. I'm going to clap again. That was just lovely.
It was great. I enjoyed that enormously.
Match of the day indeed.
Yep.
Woo! This was a good one. Very roundabout way of getting there, but that was awesome. I am thoroughly satisfied. And so is Orange. He takes down Jarla 2-1 and now moves up to a 7-5 record. So when it came to the clutch, Orange picked it up this week, 2-0 this week, and now looking great to keep his run strongly alive for that playoff position.
Yeah, fantastic performance. I think definitely I have some questions on both sides. I would be amazed if I could go through a series that complex, that in-depth, with so many extra variables to play around and not at least have questions about some of the plays that players made. But that moment at the end kind of just throws it all away. You could see on Orange's face how how stressed he was throughout that series with all the things he was being faced down, and how mentally draining a series like that is to play, even in a best-of-3 format. By the time you get towards the end of it, you are no longer functioning at full force as you were at the start, because expending mental energy is a real thing. So to still recognize that situation, see it, count all the damage correctly, just with a very weird, randomly generated card in his hand, find that elegant solution to a problem that he was faced with. Beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful to watch. Orange is ready for an interview. Orange, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, I'm going to clap one more time for the end of that.
Thank you.
That was super well spotted on that contract. Were you planning it the whole time?
No, not at all. I kind of spotted it last second. I was thinking like the entire game. I played this matchup like several hours. For several days, and the thing is that the mage, the way that Jarla sideboards is that he doesn't have very many win conditions. So I was kind of planning both games of just like getting through every single thing in his deck, like almost a fatigue plan. So I was mostly focusing on that sort of stuff. So, but I saw that I could push some damage. I had all this dead removal in my hand, and then like last second I'm like, oh, I have guaranteed 12. So.
So I want to follow up on that, because it's something that I was trying to point out several times. This man over here just wants to deal damage on all occasions.
Yeah.
And I was saying that like Orange might be planning out just to go long and kill everything here. Is that part of the reason why you seem to be valuing Evil Miscreant a lot higher than a lot of other players do in that matchup as well? Because you didn't really have a plan to be aggressive. You wanted to go for value with the Evil Miscreant?
You start off with trying to be aggressive. There are certainly some games where you just kill them on 5 or 6.
Okay.
And I do not value Miscreant that highly in this matchup. But when you get in the sort of game that doesn't happen too often, as far as my testing goes, like the grinding games really doesn't happen too often. But the last 2 games just happened to be that. And then, well, of course, Miscreant is quite valuable together with Shark.
You had mentioned in the media pieces that that Jarla is someone that you can bring different styles of decks to, because you can bring a deck that is specifically weak to aggression in that spot. Does that help you navigate that game plan when you're actually playing against him? The tendency to not bring aggressive decks, does that beget a tendency to also not be as aggressive in your gameplay?
I know that Jarla usually plays a lot for value and very little for tempo. It wasn't something I thought actively of during the series, but it's certainly something I had in mind when I was testing versus Boar Control, for example, that Jarla might not be playing it as aggressively as Boar does, because Boar is like one of the more aggressive mage players out there.
Yeah, I think that definitely shone through in the series. There were a couple of moments where I wanted Jarla to be more aggressive. He was kind of over-trading a little bit in his position. Was that something that you were picking up on from your side of things as well?
There was one spot in game 2 where he roped the entire turn, and then he pinged me on turn 3, and then I just played the Spirit of the Shark on 4, because I was thinking that he was trying to be very reactive, and if I play Spirit of the Shark, then it's just another turn that he's not doing anything on. So now he ended up like Elemental Invocation Giant, but I had a perfect monster in Sap and Miscreant, so I guess it worked out. But yeah, that was one spot at least where I did that.
And now you move up to 7-5. This is a really clutch week for you. Coming in at an even score and then picking up 2 big wins. How are you feeling about your playoff chances now?
Well, now I feel great. I wasn't feeling that amazing going into this week, but I was hoping that I could catch people off guard with a Water Rogue, and I guess it did, since I went 2-0 this week. Now I'm a little bit nervous because I don't want to waste this opportunity being in like 3rd place going into the last week. So hope I can perform as well the last week too. I'm pretty happy.
Well, I think you have every right to be happy, and honestly, I'm hoping you can too, because Orange, it's always fantastic to watch you play, and this week I think you produced some games that were quite unexpected, to say the least. Congratulations on your win, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.